welcome to Get Lit. This is a television show about local authors. My name's Pete Crooks. I'm senior editor and senior writer at Diablo Magazine. We're here at the new Walnut Creek Public Library with Berkeley author Elizabeth Rosner, whose national best-selling books, Blue Nude and Speed of Light, have delighted book club fans and readers all over the country. Welcome, Elizabeth Rosner.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Great to see you.
Yeah.
So Blue Nude, which came out in hardback in 2006,
That's right,
is coming out in paperback this week. Why did it take 4 years for Blue Nude to go from hardback to paperback?
That's a great question because it's not the usual trajectory. I think typically when there is a paperback edition, it's around 1 year post hardcover.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, it took a while because it was slow to catch fire in the hardcover edition, and my publisher decided to let it go out of print for a little while. And I guess maybe true to my nature, I took it on as my cause that that I didn't want to let the book die. It was really an important piece of writing for me, and the book has a message that I think is really still very relevant. And so I got the rights back to the book, and with the help of my original editor, was able to find a new publisher who was willing to bring it into paperback because they had faith in it, and I'm so delighted that it's back.
It's a fascinating character study. We spoke about it when it first came out.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about the characters in Blue Nude and the story?
For me, the best way to describe it in brief is that it's a story about an encounter between a post-war German who's a painter but has been blocked for many years. He's been unable to paint. He was born in Germany right at the end of the war, came to America to flee his troubled history in Germany, the Nazi past of his family. Came to America and kind of went into a tailspin with his creativity. But the book begins in the present when he is now teaching at an art institute in San Francisco, and into his classroom steps a young Israeli woman to model for the class. And she too is in some ways an exile from a war-torn country. She's come to America to try to start over. And their histories collide when they meet each other in that room. Their accents trigger each other's discomfort. And ultimately the book is really about the possibilities inherent in art to heal and transform. And for me, it's really also a book about peacemaking between individuals, but also in the ways that I believe it's possible for bigger stories to come to some kind of resolution once people are willing to look one another in the eye and see each other not as the enemy in some kind of abstract way, or even the offspring of the enemy, but also familiar human beings, and peace is possible in that way.
Those are issues that, in the historic context, you've got those relationships, cultural relationships that are so important, but relevant to the world around us right now.
Yeah.
The book coming out in paperback, what is the value for, particularly for book clubs, we were discussing that, what's the value of having a paperback edition?
In my experience with my first novel, The Speed of Light, I found that although I was delighted that so many people bought it in hardcover when it first came out, my understanding about most book groups is that they wait for a book to come out in paperback. They're buying a lot of books, or they're spending money in ways that they want to be careful with. And so paperbacks are not just more reasonably priced, but somehow they feel more accessible to people. And I think it's the format that has a longer life. My publishers are always talking about a book's shelf life, and I guess hardcovers have a relatively limited shelf life, whereas paperbacks seem to go on. And for me, particularly with Blue Nude, because the book is in many ways a story of resurrection, it's one of the themes of the novel is begin again. And I really believe that as an artist, as a writer, as a human being, as a woman, as a person living in difficult times. I think I keep thinking that Chinese curse, may you live in interesting may you live in interesting times. That the willingness and the capacity to start over is really, really important. And so the idea that the book is having a resurrection parallels for me a personal resurrection, and I hope it's inspiring to other people who are struggling with a difficult experience or time of life that they are recognizing the need to start over.
Your lead character is a teacher as well as an artist, and you've spent quite a bit of time as a writing teacher.
That's
as
right.
well as a writer. Can you tell me a little bit about your creative process as a writer and creating these characters, these fictional characters? How closely do they assume your own life, and what's your process of bringing these characters to life? How do they live in your mind before the reader ever gets to see them on the page?
Great question. I tend to start my writing process with image, and not an image that I necessarily contrive or go after, but an image that often just arises. In both my novels, there were a lot of visuals for me that I became very fascinated by when I didn't know anything about who the characters were, but I could just see them. I could see them in a room or on the street or in a space of some kind, doing something or even just sitting still, but having some kind of quality about them, some kind of presence that made me feel inquisitive, almost as if I wanted to get to know them. And what I often do is a kind of internal interview. I mean, it's as if you were one of my characters, I would be asking you questions about your history, your backstory, and my two favorite questions, and this connects to the teaching process as well, because in many ways I don't know exactly how to teach writing, even though I do it all the time, because I think the best way to teach writing is to just keep getting people to write. So I'm constantly just trying to offer support and assistance and encouragement to dive in and begin a process. But my two favorite questions to ask characters are, what do you want? And what are you afraid of? Because those give me paths of their motivation, where they're trying to get to or what they're striving for, and what's holding them back. What are the obstacles that they feel, internally or externally, are in the way of their own progress or development. And often that's very true psychologically. It's not just, oh, somebody's stopping me from achieving my goals, or I have a broken leg and I can't run a marathon. It's more my fear of failure, or my fear of being seen, my fear of disappointing my parents. Any of those more internal obstacles really fascinate me. So I'm really interested in my characters' minds and psyches.
So when you begin to interview your characters, you don't have the book's resolution in mind. You don't have the final chapter in mind.
You know, sometimes in the course of that kind of investigation, I also in many ways visually see where the book is going to land, see often in an interrelationship form in the dynamic among my characters. I see how their interactions have changed or how they themselves have grown. And then the writing process is for me a matter of how do I get there, not in a straight linear way, but what are the forward, backward, sideways movements that they go through before they can get to that resolution. And sometimes it's really the middle of the novel that takes me the longest to work out, that I will feel like I have a beginning, I will sense an ending or be able to kind of glimpse an ending. And then it's, how do I find my way there? And sometimes it's sort of like a balloon that just expands as I breathe more air and life into it.
Let's talk about your first book, The Speed of Light, which was a big bestseller. And I'm curious if you can go back in time as an aspiring author. What was it like to see your first book come out and to be so well received?
You know, it's easy to remember because it was a very pivotal threshold moment in my life. I had been working on that book for 10 years, so it reflected a big arc of time in my own life. I was teaching full time. I would work on the book primarily in the summers. And then in the last year of working on the book, I was on a sabbatical. And I really was able to fully experience what it was like to have writing be at the center of my life. And I told myself that I was already successful because I was already writing the best book I could write, and that whatever happened to it after I completed it, I felt like a writer. I felt like I was living my dream life. And then when this miracle happened and I found an agent, and the next miracle happened, which was that my agent found a publisher, and that they were so excited about the book and brought it into the world, I felt as though I had won the literary jackpot. You know, that really, this lottery that we all enter with so much hope and so much doubt, that something magical happened for me. But it mostly really was important to me that I felt like I had told a story that I really needed to tell and that was mine to tell. And getting back to the teaching piece again, I feel when I'm working with students of all ages, not just young people, that there's something in us that belongs uniquely to us, and one at a time, we are the only person who can tell that particular story in our own particular voice. So I really felt that I had done that with that book, and so to feel so well received was a deep validation for me that I had done this thing I so deeply believed in. And then it was this experience of being listened to. For me, writing is really a form of communication, and if it weren't that, I would just write in a journal and never share it with anybody. For me, writing is an act of trying to speak to someone, one person at a time. So to know that people were reading my book and hearing my voice, really the voices of all three of my characters in The Speed of Light, are variations on my own voice, parts of myself. And so there was this sense I had that I was being received. And then when people started telling me what the book meant to them, or how it affected them emotionally or psychologically, that was just a phenomenal feeling of being gifted with that response, that people took in what I had offered up and then gave it back to me.